That is a technical break very easily. Anyone can see that. You have the 3, the 5, and the 8 right here. You have this trend line. I'm going to show you where that's leading in a second. You have the H, and you can see the rejection right into there. So really what I'm looking for is I'm looking at a 4,700 clear of the top of the H before I'd even consider being net long. And then down here, I'm looking for it to hold this level and to add to the short. I want to see a clean break of the H and then go from there. We're going to jump around a lot here because there's a lot going on. But with Ethereum, that is the way that I see it. And that's where my focus would be with crypto and with specifically this name. There's a couple different ways to play this name. And you guys are probably already aware of this. But you obviously have the ETH, the Grayscale, and some of these others that are out there. I'm just going to show you it's the same soup reheated. You can see the 3, the 5, and the 8 rolling over. You are completely wedged in here with this 38.85, and you can see how you are starting to roll over, and you have the same H. What you would do is measure the H and the breadth of the H, meaning just how deep it actually is a better way of saying it, and that gets you 5%. So your target on that 5% on Ethereum is going to take you down to about, just on this ETF, it's going to take you down to about here. This is the one that I am actually short and have puts on, and this is ETHU. You can see after hours you were down to about 60, and you can see it's following the same exact pattern, and you've already broken the H here. The two X's usually tend to lead to the downside and the upside, and they kind of give you an understanding. So you can already see that we've cracked the H here where the others have not. But you definitely have a change in bias in Ethereum, and you definitely have a change in bias in these names. If you look at something like ETHU, for example, you can just see we have a doji. Maybe it holds, maybe it doesn't. But if it breaks, you're going to start doing these gap fills, and you'll start doing the dance. And you're looking at like 148, and you'll start looking at that 135 level and go from there. But this needs to hold, and I'm not so sure that it's going to, especially when you just look at how this acted today. You flipped right over. And when you flip over like this, let's clean this all off now. When you flip over like that and you make that high, that 479.2, so then you come over here and you look at that and you say 478.36. See the highs right here? So you flipped over, you have the undercut. You don't miraculously usually go, oops, I made a mistake, and just UB. Can it happen? Yeah, but usually what happens is you find a support, test that support, and then go forward. That's usually how the handles are formed on these huge cups. You don't really have a handle yet. So what I think you're setting up for, and it's just my opinion, but again, man plans, God laughs. We have to watch, see if we come down to that 4,100 and then build up and go from there. This pool right here we just do it with. So something like that, and then maybe higher. And that's not a bad thing. Backfilling and retesting a previous high, that's not a bad thing at all. Now, as stated, we're going to jump around, and we are going to jump around on this one. As always, subscribe to the channel. Click all notifications. What we go over here is extremely timely. If we look at something like an AMAT after hours, 188 to 162, that's not good. It's the exact opposite of good if you're long. And what it's doing is it's taking all semiconductor capital equipment manufacturers down with it after hours. We still have to get into PPI and what's going on there, not only the crypto move, but PPI, and that little sucks out on the day. But we can just see the straight down. Well, I'm laughing because we were trying to come up with a name in the community to what to call this specific pattern. Usually when you get the green candle up, we call it the middle finger pattern. I'm not entirely sure what you would call this, maybe the inverse middle finger. But you could see the crack right here, and now that was it. And from there, it didn't get better on the conference call. It actually got worse. It was one of those, please stop talking. But you are holding a key level down here. That 161.22 is where that key level is actually. And you're right in there and you're holding it. I was short. I did try to short it a couple times more to add to it. It just wasn't catching. So that's probably pretty washed out. And we'll see how that goes. The 13 Fs are out too, and there's some developments there. So we'll go through that. Some of these beaten down names are actually getting picked up. But this is going to add to pain, and then you're going to see pain in the Lamb research because of this. And that's exactly what you're seeing. You're seeing Lamb research drop on this call. That's down substantially. You were up, 108, and then after hours, this is where you are. This is something I really wanted to buy, and they all share like a brain. All these semi-cap names, they all share the same brain. So once that broke, that was it. Once you lose one, you can see with KLAC2. Once one breaks, that's it. They all break. There's these weird combinations because of the algorithms. It's like when Snap will miss ad rev, And then all of a sudden people will sell Meta like it has anything to do with it, right? So they all share the same brain. And when you see this, you can actually take advantage of it because KLAC crushed and was just at all-time highs. Now there's a dip on it. Lam Research was at all-time highs. Now there is a dip on it, right? And it's doing just fine. Their earnings are great. CLAC's earnings are great. And so this presents an opportunity. You'll also usually see ASML drop on, and that's exactly what it's doing. It's dropping along with it. So sometimes those understanding that interconnectivity, that does present opportunity. And this is one of those clear examples of that. Next, before we get into some of the massive whipsaws that we saw in the market today, and frankly, there were some real big ones today. The month-over-month PPI, I want you to understand why we saw what we saw today. It's super important. Yesterday, we had Besson on Bloomberg that was talking about, based upon the numbers, we're going to see a 50 basis point cut. Well, after these numbers, that might not be such the de facto case anymore. These numbers are really bad. And what we have is we have data. And so all we can do is act on the data. If we have the Treasury Secretary coming out and saying, hey, things are so bad out there, we really need to cut by 50 basis points. And then you get PPI, Producers Price Index, versus CPI, Consumer Price Index. Producer is what the producer pays. Consumer is what the consumer pays, right? This is how they make the burrito, PPI. We buy the burrito, CPI. All right, the difference between the two is corporate profits. They need to be aligned. If they're not aligned, that's when corporate profits can suffer. That's why small caps always get hit on this. Also, it has to do with the interest rate and the probability of a rate cut. So when we see something like this, it is completely, utterly out of whack. And anybody that is out there looking at this right now using this one piece of data, please listen to those words, they're going to have a real tough time saying you need to cut rates right now, considering your target is 2% and you're coming in hot like this. Now, maybe there's a justification for it. Maybe these numbers are going to come in and they're going to be adjusted again. I mean, the data lately that's been coming through this year has just been an absolute disaster, whether you agree with what's going on at BLS or not. But if you look at this data, it's really been a dumpster fire. 3.3, 2.5, 3.7, 2.9, 0.9, 0.2, 0.9, 0.2. Okay, how bad was this? It was so bad we went from a de facto that they are going to cut down here from yesterday. They're definitely going to cut. 100% chance they are cutting rates. It wasn't even a question of whether or not they were going to cut rates, to now we have an 8% chance that they are not going to cut rates because of this one piece of data. That's how bad this piece of data was today. And I don't think a lot of people get that. I don't think a lot of people truly understand just how bad this one piece of data was. So hopefully this clears it up for you. It was really bad. Let's look at it in context. And just so you can see, this is September 17th, 92.1. No change, 7.9. The day before, there was zero chance of this. I just want to take a second to really hammer this home. This is US PPI inflation month over month. Here's the number that came out. If you come straight across and look at that number, you don't have anything like that until you get into 22. So when you're trying to put this in context on how bad it was, that's how bad it was. And that's how you should view this. If we come over and we look at this on CPI, less food and energy, which they do to take out the fluctuations, even though we need food and energy. The only time that you were higher on a year-over-year basis on core CPI was January 25. Other than that, there's nothing here until you get back into this. That's how bad that number was today. It's really important to get that as we go forward into what I'm about to show you. Now, this is really where it gets, in my opinion, wild. You have the Treasury Secretary coming on yesterday and saying, we're looking at least, we want to see 50 basis points. And so what do we see on those comments on Bloomberg? We see the market just absolutely set up and then explode to the upside. We see people step in and they start buying the home builders. And then what happens today? Just the absolute rug pull on the whole thing. The entire trade was rug pulled today. So while we're flat on the market, meaning if you look at ES on the day, and I'll clean off my 1,000 levels, you're flat. You worked it off and you came in flat. Great. But you're still under that 6,500, which is not the end of the world. The NQ, you were flat. You're still struggling right now, and AMAT's not helping in this situation. But you're not falling apart either. There are some names that are falling apart, and we will get to that in a second. But what are we really seeing out there? Like, what is that driving force out there that's really hurting us? And it's RTY. And it's really because of what happened. It was really a perfect setup to say, oh, everything's great, low inflation, we have job market, and then we get a piece of data that you haven't seen in 3 years. That's why the market acted the way that it did. That's why you saw REITs do what they did. and then they're trying to rally here. That's why the home builders acted the way they did. Now, if you think it's a fluke number, then the goal is to go out there and buy these names. I think you'd have to lean towards the fact that no matter what, they're still going to cut rates. I think that's unequivocal that they're still going to do that. That said, it's up to us to figure out how to put these pieces together. So do you want to go out there and try and buy nail down here? I did try. It was very difficult. It didn't work. You're up like on pennies after hours. It's like maybe 500 shares, this thing that's trading up right now. It was very difficult to go out there and look at just printing these names and just spraying and praying that you're going to get that. There were major sell-offs today in that space. And I think that that's going to exacerbate the situation a little bit. After hours, you have the 13Fs that are out, and that'll be the fourth thing that we should really cover tonight. But I want to start here with a lot of people are not really getting the concept of lockouts ending. So obviously, CoreWeave had earnings, and the earnings were not great, and the stock's gotten absolutely decimated here, and we can see that, right? This level of decimation that you're seeing is also the lockup period. Now, after hours, you're down another $3, and you're going to bounce around a lot after hours. You just do because it's really just retail, but you're already breaking that 94 level. And to me, I think that this can go lower tomorrow. I'd watch your option market tomorrow. You really don't have anything to hide your hat on here. I mean, you have this doji right here, and the breakout of that doji, that's a big bar right here, and you cracked it today. So that really gives us that 89.23 level, and hopefully you can come in there for you guys that are trying to be long. I'm short and trying to get, trying to just stay short. If you take a look at Circle, to me, this is a no-brainer trade that you're heading right to that level. You're going to fill right in there and then see if you're going to hold that 134.20 after hours. You got to that 136.40. These were once they started going, they're pretty easy shorts, but we're not getting that momentum. But I do, before we get to the 13Fs and what I think is super interesting, I think there's a couple things out there that we should really pay attention to. Number one, when you look at the market as a whole, they sold the Mag 7 yesterday. And they sold the Mag 7, the Metas, the Microsofts. They sold these names. Why? They sold them because they were rotating into the home builders. If interest rates are going to come down, but if they're not going to come down as much, and I'd really be interested in your comments on this, do they sell the Mag 7 as fast? I don't have an answer to that. So today we started seeing that the Mag 7 started holding. You started seeing them kind of come back into those names, trying to hold Microsoft, trying to hold Google. All of a sudden, they were stagnant. Even Microsoft, I thought would fade. It didn't. It just held the line. Super interesting, super important. I am interested in your comments on that because that was the trade yesterday. It was sell the growth, buy the value. Well, today you're coming in and we have that PPI number, which is at a level that we've never seen before or we haven't seen in some time. And I think that's really important to get and look at. Before we get to the 13Fs, Intel, you're seeing this bid up, and I'm going to say something I never thought I would say. I actually bought Intel on this news. There were two pieces of news that actually got me to act before the 13Fs. But if we take a look here at Intel, what got me about this was that the CEO of the corporation's having a statement where they're canceling their Altera sale and saying that the U.S. government may actually invest in the company. If they invest it, they have all the cash they need and they'll be fine. I mean, it's really that simple. When this hits the tape tomorrow and it's in the journal and everyone's talking about it at 7 o'clock on Bloomberg, other people will come out of the woodwork and they'll start buying the thing. So that was my thought process. Not that I think that it's going to be the greatest thing in the world, but I'm already up on it and I'm just going to stay with the trade. And I did trim some of it, but be aware this will be all over the place tomorrow. It'll be in the paper. This will be a huge story because is he intervening? Is he not intervening? That kind of thing. Who cares? It's going to go up if they inject capital in it. The same way that GM went up and Ford went up when another person injected capital into the markets when they're not really supposed to do that, but they do it anyway. We'll leave it at that. Super important to know that if we're going to get into news, RBLX. So one of the themes of the short sellers has been that they are going to get sued by states. You have Louisiana filing some type of child protective act or complaint against this corporation today, and it's not getting picked up. And that does fit the theme on what these guys were talking about on the short side. So just be aware of that tomorrow if you're looking for news. This is news. on RBLX. You do want to be aware of that. It's super important to note this if you were long it. I shorted it as soon as I saw the news because it does fit that theme. And if that gets picked up, the shorts are going to have a field day here. And on option expiration, it's definitely one you're going to want to pay attention to. Finally, when you start looking at the 13Fs that come out tonight, there were two things that really stood out to me. I have two guys that bought this that I would be interested in. I'll leave it at that. One, Buffett bought this, which actually, candidly, you asked me 48 hours ago if I thought Buffett was going to buy this. There's no way in the world. So they must have done their due diligence on UNH, and they went out there and they bought it. At the time of recording this, I am long UNH. And then Tepper bought it. And Tepper's pretty tied to this current administration. There's no way that these guys are buying this thing, in my opinion. I can only give you opinion, information, education, chips fall where they may. They're not buying this thing if there's another shoe out there. And they have the lobbyists and connections to know that kind of stuff. You do what you want with that. It's conjecture, but that's my opinion of it. I think that hits the tape tomorrow as well. I think they come out and that's in the news. Buffett and Tepper are in UNH. The number one increased position for Tepper was UNH. And can you guess what number? And this is how you know he's super smart, because this is what, like, he needs me to tell him he's super smart. NVIDIA, number two, biggest increase for Tepper was NVIDIA going into earnings. That is it.